Well, welcome back. It is our fourth season of Unplugged. We're delighted to be here. Obviously, we would have kicked it off a little bit earlier, but it's been a struggle, as I'm sure most people could understand. Obviously, getting back into life throughout the pandemic, but we are ready to roll for a big season. We're certainly hoping that it is a big season for the guys. The girls have got underway. They battled hard against a fair bit of adversity this season in terms of player availability and change and fixturing and the like, but there are clear signs of improvement there. So we'll touch on how they've been pushing on as the season has progressed. We'll look ahead to our second hit out, our first official hit out against Essendon this weekend on the men's side of the draw, the Carlton game last week, which doesn't look so bad now that they're going to win the flag, the Blues. So that's something that we can certainly look towards or look back on and then look forward as well with some interest. We are also going to chat with a man whose name will be indelible with the history of the club for as long as the game is played. Everyone always remembers the iconic Leo Barry mark from the 2005 grand final, but nearly 40 years earlier, Bob Murray did exactly that for St Kilda with the game on the line, and how very different history might be for the St Kilda Football Club if that did not happen. It was a pivotal moment in a pivotal match in our history. So we'll chat to Bob, not just about that, but his journey. You can certainly hear the passion in his voice when he talks about the love of the club. He turns 80 in a few weeks' time, but still sharp as a tack and obviously full of passion for the Saints. But I'll start off with you, Nick, as we welcome you back for another season. Obviously, we didn't put our post-2021 hats on to the extent that we've done perhaps in previous seasons. But what was your post-mortem or your look back at the off season and the year that was?
Yeah, look, thanks, mate. It is good to be back. I know we've been talking about doing this first episode for a long time and just never kind of got around to getting back to it. But it has been what felt like a very long off season. I think last year was in probably equal parts devastating and also promising. There was, it's kind of St Kilda has this habit of being completely polarizing, and they can put up an absolute stinker one day and then 5 days later put up a cracking effort, and that's kind of what we did last year. The first half of the season was really disappointing, and obviously things got better during the second half of the season, and performances improved, and got back on track to some extent, but kind of the damage was done earlier in the season, and we were never kind of able to get back to 50-50 properly and get back, even though we were kind of still in the frame for a finals berth towards the end of the season. It was just, was just a step too far for us after what we'd put up earlier in the year. But promising signs in some of the preseason games so far. Obviously, it was a pretty impressive draft haul for us. Everyone that we wanted, that we spoke, in our final episode last year, the two next gen academy boys that we really wanted in Windhager and Owens, we were able to walk away with, as well as Josiah Kyle and Jack Perris as rookies, and able to also bring in probably the best kick in the draft in Wanganeen Malera, which is obviously a skill set that we dearly need and have lacked for some time. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Rats lines this team up in round one. I'm not sure if we're going to learn too much out of the loss to Carlton a week ago, and whatever comes next in the Essendon Amy Community Series, Ansett Cup, Wizard Cup, Toilet Bowl competition. But it's not really about that. I'm really looking forward to round one and seeing how the club lines up. H, what about you?
Yeah, I think you've summed it all up pretty well there. That last year was one of those years that it sort of looked like when it looked like it was just about to turn our way, something just went wrong and pushed you back, and it just one of those seasons you go, it didn't work out, and that's as simple as you can put it. I mean, we didn't play that many bad games. It was
But the
we
bad
just
ones
didn't
were
have
real
that
bad.
last. Yeah, the bad ones are really bad. There was just a few of those.
And there were some
The
bad
rest of them
quarters that
will,
cost us in
yeah,
games where we
yeah,
played pretty well.
yeah. Whereas other years we've had many bad games and nothing's worked. We've lost a couple of games where we've gone, well, we probably should have won that. We've lost a bit of percentage on games where we've had control and let a team back in. It's just, it wasn't a complete four-quarter performance throughout the entire season. I reckon we played 2-3 games where we control the game for 4 quarters almost.
Yeah, I think
So
probably Brisbane and was probably our best performance of the year.
Yeah, Hawthorn and Freo, maybe.
Richmond wasn't too bad in the wet on the Friday night.
yeah, so it was just one of those ones where we just couldn't put enough together. So you'd almost look at a season and go, look, if you broke the season up into 4 quarters, we probably had 2.5 to 3 decent quarters, but you need that 3.5 minimum to have a good season. So it's just getting those last little bits right, getting in these players just to fill the gaps that we need, get back to players like Patton. He was a huge hole we missed last year. We missed as soon as Gresham was gone, that created a massive hole. Dunstan came in and did pretty well, but Gresham was a huge hole when he went out injured. So getting him back, getting Patton back, we've unfortunately lost Caulfield now. So there's a little bit of a like for like, I guess. So yeah, it'd be just a matter of just getting the team together, getting them in the right direction, and hit round 1 hard.
Yeah, the season last year in a lot of ways almost defined by the Geelong games, both of them. Obviously, the year there were losses that were hard to explain. So the Essendon loss early, the Bulldogs loss especially. I know they were a good side, but it shouldn't happen to that magnitude. Richmond the first time, Port Adelaide the first time, Carlton late in the year.
Adelaide.
Yeah,
Adelaide half against the Crows.
Yeah, when we went goalless for an hour or thereabouts. So there were things that were difficult to explain, but then I thought our season, we got back to 4-4 and then lost a game to Geelong, which we should have won comfortably. We slaughtered shots at goal. If you win 3 in a row, then we would have jumped into the 8 at 5-4, and you wonder what that does to your momentum. And then obviously we played Geelong again late in the year where we had to win to stay alive, kicked the first 5 goals of the game, and then Max King went off with a hammy, and we're only a point down with 4 minutes to go in that match and just got nutted late. So we probably should have won both Geelong games. And that would have been factoring in. We win both the Geelong games, we make the 8. And then you factor in the inexplicable shockers that we had. So the optimist says we had a lot of shockers. We had a lot of injuries. We couldn't get any momentum and we missed the 8 by a game. And then there's the other factor saying, well, are any of those problems still lurking below the surface? Are they still likely to throw up a couple of them? I don't know. How's the fitness of our ruck stocks and things like that? But yeah, I think Gresham and Patton basically new recruits. Josh Battle is a defender, basically a new recruit. I think they have to find a spot for him, and I think that is the spot for him. Definitely. And then, what do we get out of obviously Windhager and Owens? It was so important that we got them in the academy. Owens has got a good size frame, works hard. Windhager presented well. Looks like he'll play some footy. I guess the other changes were the Jack Hayes news confirmed this week. He looks pretty comfortable at the level. Patrick Nash was training with the club, but he's been moved on. He's actually with West Coast training with them at the moment. So it looks like Jared Lynott will get that last spot. And he's a defender.
I reckon any of us three could get a game with West Coast at the moment. So
probably they've got nothing left really. But Jared Lynott looks like he'll probably get that spot. So he's a defender who can kick the thing a mile, as he showed in the intra-club match. He's pretty tough. And Marshall would have played half the games last year. So he's a big factor.
Darren, I wanted to ask you, mate. I mean, we've heard a lot of stories about those two in particular, next gen boys in Owens and Windhager. But I guess everyone's seen the same stories. Whether it's from Kevin Sheehan or Cal Toomey or whoever, everyone sees those stories. But most of us never saw those kids playing. You were one of the few you were able to commentate some of those games last year and in previous years. What's your take? Obviously, you saw them up front and close at the intra-club as well. What's your take on those two specifically?
Well, Owens appears to have grown even in that little short space of time between, say, July last year and now, certainly muscular-wise, he's got a big frame. But I called the Vic Metro, Vic Country championship match last year in the middle of the year. It was at Windy Hill. Mitch Owens was an emergency for that game, but a player, I can't remember who it was, went out of the side an hour or so before, and he played and was best on ground, had 32 touches, 7 tackles, kicked a couple of goals. And I thought, and I didn't know, and it was actually Kevin Sheehan who was next to me. He said, he's aligned with St Kilda's academy. And obviously the eyes prick and you're like, well, hang on a sec. So then you start following him very closely. And for the rest of the year, he just got better and better. He fed off that game where he went from not being in the team to playing and dominating. And he just grew in confidence. And in a way, had the season not have stopped with COVID, he might have played so well that he would have got taken top 20 and we would have lost him. So that's a very small blessing that comes out of that. Windhager played forward in that game, almost exclusively as a small forward. Got a few touches, looked lively, didn't dominate, but then he obviously started to play a bit higher up the ground as the year went on. So very, very promising. That intra-club performance was I probably saw him play 4 times. That was probably the best of all of those. He looked really comfortable in that game. The other ones who probably won't play footy this year is Max Heath. For those who watched the intra-club match, he probably beat Marshall 4 or 5 times in direct ruck contests. He took a big mark in a goal square. He's still got some way to go, but it's very hard to tell with ruckman, but he looks pretty good to me. So yeah, that's one to watch. Another year or so of education of the Ryder Marshall variety. He looks like he'll be able to make it pretty well. So, and obviously Peris, who you mentioned, the son of Nova Peris, who is a dual Olympian. So you'd expect him to have a bit of pace, and he looks like he does. So, yeah, I think it was a pretty good haul, all things considered.
Now, you say Battle, I guess, is a kind of a new recruit when you look at it. We're going to actually, looks like we might find a position for him and settle him into it. Do you think Corey Enright had much input in that? Do you think he's been possibly looking at it from the outside and going, he should be a defender?
Possibly,
because there's one of the key changes in behind the scenes.
That probably is the key change from a footy department perspective is Corey Enright and his reputation, both as a player and as a footy brain and coach as well. But I mean, Josh Battle's best footy. I know he was drafted as a forward. He was an underage, came in with a big, kind of developed but underdeveloped body, and never really settled in the forward line for us. But his best footy has been as a defender. Whether it's as a third man up or loose man in defence, or even at centre half back, as we've seen before. And I'm really excited to see what he can do if, as it looks like he's kind of been given that spot and been told, you're the centre half back now, make it your spot. And it's yours.
The game to think back to is the Freo game at Marvel that time. He owned the backline that day almost. When you look at it, you look back and he was just everywhere. So
took that game-saving mark as well.
Took 14 marks that day.
Yeah, it'd just be so good to see him
goal just before
finally get that position and just own it, because we know how good a footballer he can be. We've seen. But he just hasn't been given the opportunity to do it.
Felt for him, because in 19 he played back and was top 5 in the BNF. 2020 he started forward and looked okay, and then last year he was everywhere: ruck, wing, back, forward, and then got dropped because he lost his way. So, and the theory was you'd lose him if you didn't. You were kind of wasting an asset because he was so multifaceted. But and particularly with Carlisle and Frawley and these guys gone, and even Caulfield, who's a small, probably a medium defender. Battle gets that opportunity and he should stay there all year because Sharman can take that forward role. So.
Well, he's almost he's got all the attributes and the tools that all of the great defenders currently have. And you look at guys, whether it's Alex Rance or Jake Lever or Jeremy McGovern, almost Jeremy Howe to some extent. In the ability to get across the ground, reads the ball incredibly well in the air, understands where it's going to be, when it's going to be. But he's also a beautiful kick of the ball. Great hands to mark it and read it, but beautiful kick of the ball, whether it's at goal or at field level, and hitting up players further up the ground. I think he's that perfect blend of defense and offense from that position. And it's just a matter of him taking that opportunity. And like we've said a number of times, over a couple of years, I think that he's never had that opportunity to settle into one spot. And like you said, Parko, it's kind of, it's the blessing and the curse is he's got all these attributes and he can play multiple roles and do, interesting things at either end of the ground or in the middle or whatever, but has never been able to settle into one spot and play his best footy for an entire season. And that's really exciting from a fan perspective to be able to kind of think of him as a centre half back and not as a swing man, not as a forward move defender, whatever. Let's see what we're going to do with Josh Battle this week. And I think that must give him some relief and some calm as well.
Yeah, and we need obviously Marshall and Ryder to stay fit, so we don't have to throw him onto the ball or anything like that. So whether they go with Sharman, who rucked a bit in the intra-club match, obviously Tom Campbell's on the list as well, who 20-odd hit-outs last week, even though we got murdered in the middle of the ground. So we'll touch a little bit on those games as well. Obviously, on a personal front, upgrading to NBN in the off season, so hopefully my coverage isn't shithouse anymore. We had some problems in previous seasons.
Was it Sammy Hamill's parting gift from the club that he got you that router that he promised?
Yeah, it's a mysterious box showed up on the front porch. So I think that was the other modem from Sammy. But now Cranbourne finally discovered that NBN exists, so we're able to eventually go down that path. But
kick around the corner from Sermon won't be enough. The Saints break through for their first win of the season. 336 days since they last got to sing the song, and they'll do it again this afternoon.
We'll touch on the Essendon and the Carlton. The previous Carlton game and the upcoming Essendon game, and then I'll look towards the Pies in round one. But I guess a comment on the girls, it was always going to be very tricky this year. Obviously, we're certainly hoping that our best player, Georgina Patrikios, will be back and available for next season, but it's unfortunate the way that has all unfolded, and I guess the less said the better in many respects. We've obviously had injuries, we had the coaching change, we had issues around certain aspects of fixturing, but look, we lost the West Coast game we probably should have won. We were competitive against Brisbane. It's hard to put that in a should have won basket because they kicked 3 goals 13 that day and had way more shots than we did. Definitely should have beaten the Giants. That was a disaster. Footy's back in February well and truly when you storm out of the house in a huff, losing a game like that. And then they got what they deserved clearly against the Suns. They thoroughly deserved that result. It looked like it was going to go the same way. But yeah, a really good tick for their confidence. It was going to be tough for them this year, but one thing I have liked, with the exception of the Carlton game, which was a disgrace, it must be said, I think they've fought pretty hard. I think they've, against the odds, they've been fairly gallant. They've certainly battled to improve, and I think they have. So if you put the Carlton game as an outlier, I think their effort has been pretty solid.
I think you've nailed that. I mean, like you said, it was always going to be tough for them this year, and then they lose Patrikios and Smith, which just makes things, inconceivably harder. I mean, it's almost impossible to quantify. When you're already lacking in, I guess, overall squad talent. We've got some very good players, and then you lose most of those very good players for whatever reason. It was almost impossible from the start. Then you add in the COVID rescheduling and the fixture changes and not being able to play at home and a whole range of things. It was always going to be a very tough season. But you're right. I mean, you can never blame them or accuse them of not having a crack. And to their credit, they've played some pretty good footy at times. They've opened games often. It's usually in that first quarter, they play some really, really good footy. And then whether it's fitness or, like I said, that lack of talent or whatever, they tend to drop the ball a little bit, but they don't stop trying. And even when they've been belted, once or twice, you can still tell that they're still running games out as best they can. And it's just a shame that they don't have some of those girls around them that can lift them up and make them better.
Yeah, you definitely couldn't say they haven't had a crack at it, because I don't know how many times I've looked at the score and you're in the second quarter, the third quarter, and the scores are almost level or they're ahead, and I haven't had the chance to actually sit down and watch the game. And then you look at the score again and go, oh, they got absolutely belted in the last 20 minutes. But that's what happens with a young, inexperienced, and lacking, I guess, that top tier of player. As soon as you lose that, as you're saying, it's harder for, I guess, a group to bring everyone up together instead of having that leader or a couple of leaders who really push the team along and pull them out of a hard situation where a team's got a bit of momentum. if you haven't got those leaders, it's really hard to stop. So it's a matter of they've shown it for the first few quarters, and then that young and experience has just come out, and the oppositions, which, like, you look at the Melbourne game, how experienced Melbourne are. We held with them for 3 quarters, and then they've just blown us away in the last quarter.
Yeah.
It's that if you looked at the first 3 quarters and just watch that game and went, yep, that's a good game of footy. If you watch just the last quarter, you've gone, how was this team even close at that point? It's just it's just 2 games within the one game when you look at them that way.
I'm going to propose a segment that we perhaps introduced this year called "That's Very St Kilda," because there are 2 things that come to mind as being very St Kilda. And every week there'll be something that's very St Kilda. It's very St Kilda that of all the players in the competition, our best player is the one doing her own research. That's very St Kilda. And the other one that's very St Kilda is that the umpire forgot to blow the whistle the time on in the Giants game, and we lose 23 seconds and get beaten after the siren. That's very St Kilda.
Which one of those would you say is more St Kilda?
Probably that last one, I would say, is very St Kilda, when the ball wouldn't have even left our forward line if that whistle had been blown correctly. And I remember watching it at the time and noticed it, but didn't think much of it. I'm just like, shouldn't the clock be ticking?
Yeah.
But I actually thought we were safe.
Why
so
isn't? I remember thinking, why isn't Tani White running the clock down?
Yeah.
Like, why is she blazing away? And she, and I think she's going to be a star, by the way. I'm very impressed by Tani White.
Well, she kicked the goal that put us in front.
Yeah. And did a couple of other things around the ground, in that kind of those passages of play. But that was very St Kilda.
Not getting an immediate result as Xavier Clark attacks it. Gehrig up in midfield. Oh, magnificent from the G-train, like a ballet dancer. Gives to Fisher and to Revolt. Well, what inspiration from Twinkle Toes Gehrig.
Voss, long ball forward, Milne. Brown, Gehrig. Look at Big Fraze. Stands, gets around Rivers and kicks a goal.
Great effort.
Course of the year. I guess the other one is, it's at the time of recording, maybe not at the time of listening, but at the time of recording, it's Fraser Gehrig's birthday, the G-Train. So I'll put you both on the spot whilst I give mine. Your favourite Fraser Gehrig moment? Mine is probably a collection of moments. My favourite thing about Fraser Gehrig was his sneaky play on, where he'd take a mark and then he'd walk, take a few steps in and point at the grounds, whilst the umpire and the defender would take a look at it, and then he'd almost use the umpire as a block, and then he'd sprint off. He was quite quick, Fraser, and I used to love that, where he'd take the mark, point at the ground, and then just barrel away and kick a tremendous goal on the run that would get the crowd up. He did it a couple of times in the preliminary finals in 04 and 05. So there's a lot of funny stuff with Fraser, but I love that. It was very clever.
Yeah, those first couple of steps, he just kind of shuffled off the mark, and then just went into that loping gait, and then bang.
Yeah, well, I did see, I remember something from back when he was playing. Apparently over the 10-meter sprints, he was our fastest.
Yeah,
so
almost the league's fastest.
Knowing that,
at West Coast,
at
West Coast, he won their sprints and their bench press.
He holds a record in the AFL, I think, in bench press.
I think so. H, your favourite Fraser Gehrig moment?
I'd have to go back to the winning goal against North Melbourne. I was sitting right in that pocket, right where he was then kicking, and I kind of remember having a view that I couldn't see the goals, so I was directly in line with the post, so I couldn't see around or if it was where it went through, sort of thing. But I kind of watched him as to what was happening, and unfortunately, he doesn't give much away. So I had to then work with the cheer squad if they went up or not. So, but yeah, it was just sort of, you could see it from a long way away that the ball was going to land in his chest, because Harves picks it up in the midfield, and you're looking and you went, he's one out, he's by himself with his defender, and you're going, he's going to get this ball, and delivered. It wasn't a great kick actually, but it landed on his chest and
did the trick.
Put it through, and it was a great result, that one.
Hard to go past that one.
It is, and that was one of my 2. And so I'll go with the other one, and that was the first quarter demolition of Brendan Favola. I love that moment. It was kind of one of those memories when you look at the old-fashioned key forward, and obviously for us, we go to Plugger at Moorabbin, and some of those games like the Adelaide game in '91, where he's kicking bags in the first quarter and just destroying fullbacks, and what Plugger did to Danny Hughes in '91, that was like what G Train did to Fev in that day when Pagan put Fev at fullback to teach him a lesson, and he got taught a lesson very early and very quickly, and I'm not sure he ever went back into the defensive 50 again.
Probably the other one just before we chat to Bob Murray is the official opening this week at the Danny Frawley Centre at Moorabbin. We've followed that journey since its inception. It's been an idea in the works for a couple of years now, and I was lucky enough to speak to Chelsea Frawley during the week in another media role, and she sort of summed it up at the end, saying that Dad always used to joke that he should have had his name on a stand or a name on the ground or his name on somewhere, and now he does. It's obviously a shame that he's not around to actually see that, unfortunately, but that legacy and all of the hard work he did, it's good that will be acknowledged. We mentioned it a bit, and a lot of members will have the chance to put their name on seats in that grandstand, which sits at the front of the Danny Frawley Centre at Moorabbin. So, it's that timely reminder, and certainly, a very worthy place upon that venue, which was his home for so long.
Yeah, probably not much more we can say on that. I think you summed that up pretty nicely. But obviously, we've been lucky enough to talk to Chelsea, Stewie Lowe, and Rob Harvey, and Berkey, and all those guys that played with and loved Spud, as we all did as fans. But if you want some tear jerkers, go back and listen to those ones.
Yeah, it sort of prompted me to do that a bit during the week, actually, after that chat. So it's fitting. It's always that famous story, because Bob Murray is in the St Kilda team of the century, and one of my favourite Danny Frawley stories is actually in a media sense. One of our hosts used to obviously just assumed that he was in the team of the century, and used to introduce him on air every week as team of the century defender Danny Frawley, and he wasn't in the team of the century, but for 2 years he never once corrected that statement. So which I thought was very amusing. He didn't lean over and say, "I'm actually not in the team of the century." But,
so
I think he was very happy for that to be said.
So here's a question: who's named at fullback in the team of the century? Because Bob Murray's named on the bench in the team.
Verden Howe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Retrospectively, Max would obviously go pretty close too. So
have to.
Yeah. And obviously you look at even modern guys like Chips, not at full back, but certainly within that defensive setup as well. But a man who is in the team of the century as a defender, and for very good reason, for more than just one moment, but it was a pretty special moment at that. We speak of Bob Murray.
Side. They send themselves. There's a goal. Tottenham upright. Tottenham kicks to centre half forward. They set themselves, and a mark to Bob Murray. A mark to Murray. 28 and a half minutes gone. Hit the boundary line. 28 and a half gone. There's Murray's kick to the point position on the outer side. There's a siren. They've got it. Look at this.
Well, nearly 40 years before Leo Barry, there was Bob Murray. The 1966 grand final is remembered for a lot of things, but the final passage of play when Des Tuddenham, racing down the outer side wing at the MCG, had a full ground in front of him and drove the ball inside 50. It was Bob Murray that took the mark that repelled that one final foray for Collingwood and helped deliver the goods for us. It was a 12-year career, though, that netted a best and fairest, 150 games for the club, 8-time representative of Victoria. So a very fine player with a very fine moment as well. Bob, thank you for your time.
No worries, Dan.
Now, that moment, as I say, Des Tuddenham running down the wing, everyone always says he had a paddock in front of him. He could have taken 3 bounces and carried it further. Obviously, he's kicked, and you've read it. Can you take us through that moment?
Yeah, well, he probably could have run a bit further, but in retrospect, time was getting on in the game, so he probably thought that he'd deliver it down as quickly as he could, and really, that's the way forwards like it to come anyway. Quick and long if they can. But just I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time, really.
Now, Bob, as I guess one of the few people to have that feeling, but what was that moment like when the siren went and all of a sudden St Kilda were premiers for the first time, and what was that moment like?
Well, to be honest, Nick, it was a real relief. Like the pressure of being in that position and being the first team to win it, like the realisation wasn't there for me. It was just utter relief that we'd finally made it. And it was only after you sort of grew used to it, really, that the fact that you had one, in some ways you thought you were having a dream and thought you're not going to wake up. This game hasn't happened as it has turned out.
Did Gene's put much emphasis on 65 and then making sure that we did the same didn't happen in 66? And did he play much on it, or just put that behind and said, this is what we're looking at, we're focusing on where we are right now, sort of thing?
No, Jamesy didn't mention it at all, really. But certainly a lot of play. I know it was a big motivational factor for me because I know how we felt after the game, and I remember going out at three-quarter time when we were leaving the huddle, and Jamesy gave a fantastic speech. And I just commented to a couple of guys around us, don't forget how we felt last year. Let's give it as much as we can. And it was certainly, to me, and I'm sure to others, a motivational factor, because the feeling after losing a grand final is just horrendous. Often likened it to losing a close relative or friend.
Yeah, we can certainly sympathise. Unfortunately, we've experienced that side, but not the other side. Sadly, in our time since. But Alan Jeans, you had the one coach at St Kilda. It was Alan Jeans the whole time. He coached from 61 to 76, and you were there 63 to 74. Can you take us through that special relationship? Every player speaks so passionately about Jeansy, and you mentioned that speech at three-quarter time as well.
Yeah, I think Jamesy was as much about character development as he was about developing your football, because he was a man of high character. He was demanding, but he was fair, and he expected people to be given their best, and he expected the best, and he gave his best. But he also tried to build the character of the people and the place, because really, footy clubs that get on, and we were terrifically close mates, all of the fellas down there, and I'm sure that had a big, big bearing in us being able to get to where we got. But Jamesy always encouraged high character, humble in victory, and also defeat. Don't go lair-rising and things like that. Just take it in stride. And that was his doctrine, really.
Now, Bob, I guess before that moment, before you were, I guess, universally recognised as the best fullback in the VFL, you came to St Kilda as a forward. You were born in Tassie, grew up in Victoria, and spent some time with Sandringham. Is that right, in the VFA?
Yes, I went to Sandy when I was 17. So I played with a church group called Elsinore United. They didn't have much junior football in those days. I played a little bit of under 15s at Melbourne High, but the rest of it was pretty well open age. So I went from Elsinore to Sandringham. At the end of a season, after our season had finished, and played a couple of games in the second, and then next year I went and played for them for the next 3 years.
And what was the?
We're lucky enough.
How did you end up at St Kilda from Sandringham?
St Kilda got in touch with me and asked me if I'd be interested in going down. I actually went down and trained and played a couple of practice matches in 1962. But I think it was a mates thing, really. I'd made so many good mates at Sandy that I wanted to keep playing with them. And then so I went back to Sandy and played that year there. And that year we actually were lucky enough to win the grand final. So that in itself was a big reward. But then in '63 they asked me to come down again. And I did the full pre-season.
So yeah, you started in the forward line in '63. '64
Yes.
didn't play any games. I haven't seen yet. I'm not sure whether that's an injury or that was a change in you weren't getting games. But '65 became back as a defender. What was the transition there?
In '64 I did a cruciate ligament in my left knee in a practice game, so I spent the whole year. In those days, they didn't have the technology they do today to really repair it, so you just had to get it going, and it was virtually, bits loose and that for the rest of my career because they didn't have the ligament reconstruction like they do nowadays. So I missed '64, and then in '65 I started back and played a few games forward in the seniors, and then the form wasn't red hot, so I can remember we played at Geelong one day, and Genji came up, and I was in the second, and he came up and said, "Have you ever played in the back line?" I said, "No, I haven't really. I've had it my whole career." And he said, "I'm going to play at fullback today in the reserves at Geelong." And then that transpired. And coming out on the bus, he came up and sat next to me and he said, "How did you find it?" I said, "No, it's pretty good. I enjoyed it because probably being a forward, you knew what forwards didn't like you doing, like the parts of the ground you didn't like shut off and things like that. So you had a bit of insight that way." And she said, I'm considering playing a fullback next week. And I said, "Oh, well, I'll give it another go." He said, "But in the seniors." I said, "Oh, no." Anyway, he did. We played Melbourne at the MCG. They hadn't been beaten. I went to fullback, and Jordan Howley was Brownlow medalist at fullback. He went to full forward that day. I can still remember the start of the game. Actually, I walked up to the end where John Lord was the full forward for Melbourne. You could see him just smiling, thinking, "This guy doesn't even know which way they're kicking."
You transitioned from Junction Oval, where St Kilda played up until '65, to Moorabbin. You played in the first game at Moorabbin, 51,000 people against Collingwood. It seems remarkable to comprehend that at the moment, but can you take us through that? I mean, what it was like having the new home and having it embraced so much the way it was?
Yeah, it was huge, absolutely huge. Like, I don't know how they fitted that many people in the ground because it was just chock-a-block and overflowing. But yeah, it was loud and it really set up Moorabbin as a venue for us. Popularity of it was terrific, and when you look back, like the old St Kilda ground was a beautiful surface and a lovely ground to play on, but they couldn't come to terms with the cricket club because they were virtually the owners. I think they couldn't come to terms with financial side of things, so they had to move out.
And I guess the follow-up on the 65-66 thing, I heard Neil Roberts once tell a story that in '65, before the grand final, all of the players got their family together and organised them and caught up with everybody. And it was a completely different setup. And Alan Jeans reportedly in '66 said, no, don't worry about that. We'll take care of your family. We'll do all of that. You keep Friday nights normal. You keep Saturday morning normal. Was it a bit like that where it was maybe in '65 we lost a bit of focus and got it right the next time?
I'm not sure about the focus side of things. But certainly, you've got to keep your routine as normal as possible. You don't want to be out of routine, and probably we were a bit out of routine because of that. But I don't think it had any great influence. Just on the day, Essendon played much better than we did. We were probably a bit overawed because, being in our first granny, we were, all nervous and just didn't perform on the day.
Bob, obviously everyone talks about those couple of moments in the '66 grand final. Obviously your mark, Barry Breen's point, There are a few things I think that maybe the younger generation either don't know or haven't been told or whatever. Things like Cowboy Neal's performance, obviously Doc Baldock on one leg, and what he was able to do coming into that game injured. What are your memories of that day in particular? I mean, outside of the those things that everybody knows that they've seen in the highlights and that sort of stuff, but what are your particular memories of that game?
Oh, look, there's one fella, Ian Cooper, who unfortunately passed away a few months ago. He played a brilliant game, especially in the first half that day. He probably had never got the recognition that he deserved on his game. Although he got best player, he won the medal too. So that's good recognition. But really, in the public eye, he didn't get as much recognition as, say, Breeny's point. And you talk about Cowboy, he kicked 5 goals out of 10.
Yeah.
Half your score. So that's a big effort. And then, look, everybody just played their role that day. Brian Minot was tireless. And the people that weren't really well known, John Bingley had played 4 or 5 games for St Kilda, and they brought him in to play on Tuddenham because Tuddenham kicked 7 goals in the second semi-final, and he did a terrific job. He was just on his toes all day and kept him honest. Tuddenham still played okay, but certainly didn't dominate the game like he did in the second semi.
So there's only a few minutes of footage of the aftermath of the game in the rooms and that sort of thing, but how long did it actually go on for?
Well, the partying probably went on for about 3 weeks, I would have thought. But we all went out that night to the Southern Cross, and then Brian Sierakowski's father ran a hotel down in Brighton, so we all ventured back there after the Southern Cross closed down and spent the wee hours down there. But really, yeah, it was. And then in those days, a few of the sponsors like Rothmans Rothmans cigarettes were one of the big sponsors. They had a big do in Port Melbourne there, and some of the supporters. One was as I remember, had this Chinese restaurant. We had a night there, but it was really well celebrated. But actually, the thing I remember most about the celebrations was the Supporters' Day they had at Cranbourne. They had a Supporters' Day at the Cranbourne Racecourse, and to me, I knew how much it meant to the playing group and the club to win that flag, but until that day, I didn't know how much it meant to the supporters. And that was one of the most enlightening and enjoyable experiences of my whole football career, just being there with those people. And it was, I think it might have been the first. Like nowadays, like all the footy clubs have supporters' days after the grand final, but St Kilda, that was really groundbreaking. And it was certainly worthwhile, and it made every player appreciate just how much it meant to the people that supported you.
Now, apologies for following that one up with a tricky question, but obviously the bonds over the years are memorable. But we know that unfortunately over time, Alan Jeans, Darryl Baldock, Travis Pays, obviously recently you mentioned Ian Cooper. I know Cowboys not in the best of health. There have been players from that era like John Bonney very recently as well. I guess how difficult has that been given the lifelong bonds you've had with all of these guys?
It is tough. And Roger Head was another one. Roger Head played in the back pocket. It's very trying times, but we try and get to, unfortunately with Coops, because of COVID, it was not able to happen, but they were hoping to have a Memorial Day, and the same happened with Jimmy Reed. When he passed away with COVID, they had a Memorial Day down at Pakenham. And we've had a couple of days up in Wodonga, Albury with Cowboy. Breeny and Ross Smith have virtually organised that. Ross Smith does a terrific job keeping the players up to date with what's going on and who's maybe struggling a bit, who needs a bit of a phone call or something like that. So we really, it is very, very difficult when one of your real mates does pass on.
Just to follow on that, Bob. Obviously, COVID over the last couple of years has made those things a lot more difficult and kind of highlighted the difficulty in mates being able to catch up and stay in touch and all those sorts of things. But I guess pre-COVID, were you able to get together as a group regularly or often? And how do you keep in touch these days?
Well, we do. The club was really good. I suppose being the one and only Premiership side, like if the club made the finals, we were often invited down. And if they made the grand final, when they made the grand finals against Adelaide and then Collingwood twice, we were all invited down to the night afterwards to the celebration dinner, which is really fantastic by the club. We have get-togethers. There's a former players thing that a lot of people go. I don't get down as often because I'm in the country now, and we like Breeny or the club used to organise get-togethers. We've had reunions down at the footy club, so we do get to see one another. But we're fairly well spread out. We've got Sarah and Bird and Howe over in Western Australia, so we don't get together as often as we would. As far as I'm concerned, I'm probably I see a lot more of Carl Dittrich and Breeny, Ross Smith. I play golf with Ross and Jeff Moran once a year at least. We have a little challenge, and I've been on a couple of vacations and holidays with Carl and Elena, his wife.
Now, Darren mentioned earlier that you were selected for Victoria 8 times, but the other thing you were also selected for in 1969 was the All-Australian team. Obviously, it would be a lot different to what it is these days, but how did that all happen? Did they just call you up and say, oh, we've been selected for this, or was there any sort of fanfare behind it, or was it just a selection thing?
There's a little bit of it all hinged around a carnival they had every 3 or 4 years, and we played one in Adelaide, and it involved Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria, and Tasmania. You'd play all the sides once over the course of a week, so you had 3 games, maybe Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, which was unusual in those days to play 3 games in a week. And then they'd announce at the end of that carnival the All-Australian side from what happened during those games. And I was lucky enough to, be named at fullback.
Last one from me. Just keen for people who might not know, obviously outside of football, I understand you were a school teacher. Is that correct? Can you sort of take us through that career path, and maybe how much did your football ever cross over in things you learned from Jeansy as to the way to deal with some of the kids?
Probably not. Look, I really enjoyed teaching, and of course, football was nowhere near professional in those days. I often hark back to our grand final payment. But I think there were 103,000 people at the game. I don't know how much they paid to get in. Say it was $1. It was $103,000. Our payment was $50 each for the game, and really we would have paid $50 to play it, and we really weren't in it for the money. We were in it. We worked during the week. We'd train 2 nights a week and sometimes Sunday mornings, and enjoyed the company of the people, but it was a sideline for us, really.
Bob, last one from me. Obviously, Darren's and Aaron both have mentioned kind of the Victorian selections, the All-Australia now, but you're also a best and fairest winner in 1969 and a member of the St Kilda team of the century. Looking back on your career now, we're obviously, we're 50, 60 years on from that time of your life, but what does that mean to you now?
I was never a great one for the accolades. I just love being with my teammates and playing the game. I think, it's great to get those sorts of things, but there's probably lots of other people, through one circumstance or another, have missed out. So you've got to be on the lucky side of things in a way to get there. But I always did regard winning the club best and fairest as probably the achievement, and that making the team of the century, which I was most surprised at making, to be perfectly honest. But winning the best and fairest at your club itself was, probably the pinnacle.
And look at the current times. I assume you still keep up with the club a fair bit. Is there anyone there at the club now that you sort of go, I really like the look of him, and you just sort of follow them and keep up with how they're going and keep a bit of an eye on them during the game? And is there anyone that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I do. I do still follow them. I haven't been to. Well, I didn't get to a game last year, mainly because of COVID, I would have thought. But I used to go down my son barracks for the Saints, so we used to go down to 2 or 3 games a year. Yeah, I really like, I like the likes of Marshall and King and Steele. Like, Steele's an absolute gun, isn't he? Right. But I like the way they play. I think footy nowadays is so much more skillful, so quick, much more quick. I couldn't see myself playing in today's game, to tell you the truth, because it's just speeded up that much, and you haven't got time to turn around, let alone hit the ball. It
is a different game, but I do see a bit of Bob Murray in Cal Wilkie, in the way that Cal Wilkie goes about it. It's in the back line.
Yeah, he's been good, hasn't he? Like, for a mature age, I'm pretty sure he was. He's done really well, adjusted really quickly, and look, they've got some good players that just got to be probably a bit more consistent and also have a better run with injuries. They had a pretty ordinary run with injury last year, and any side that really gets into the finals, most of them that win the grand final, like Melbourne last year and Hawthorn when they were winning, and the Swans when they were winning, they had really good runs with injury.
Yeah, it's very true. Well, Bob, a lot of us as Saints fans, we often lament after bad days. What's the point of it all? Why do we put ourselves through it? But people like yourself have provided that example and that reason for the last 50 odd years. It's been the beacon as to what is actually possible, and we certainly hope that sooner rather than later you guys get some well overdue company in that Premiership club that you can sit there and have a beer with, and that club can grow and grow and grow. But thank you for giving us some of those insights. It was a wonderful journey, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure all the boys, we're all chafing at the bit for them to win another one. People say, I bet you hope they don't win. That is as far from the truth as you could ever get. We all really would love them to win another granny, and they've been so close.
Yeah, they have indeed. Thanks, Bob. Bob Murray there. Great to get those insights. I love that chat. He's our second St Kilda Premiership player that we've spoken to on the program. We've spoken to so many that should be, but he's the second one of those that we've been lucky enough to speak to on the program, and hopefully, we can tell those stories, because look, the sad and unfortunate reality is that there are less and less of them each year, unfortunately. So we'll try to tell those stories as much as we possibly can, and it was good to get those insights from Bob. H, the thoughts on the Carlton game? Obviously, as I said, they're on track to win the flag, so it doesn't look so bad. Last week's performance, I actually thought we played quite poorly, but had a really good run in the second quarter and ended up losing by a kick. So.
Yeah, I saw bits on and off live, and then went back and quickly skipped over it, knowing that it wasn't a great game and that sort of thing. And I just put it down to, it's the first hit out.
Yeah.
Players are getting used to each other again. They're getting used to being back out in the ground against opposition that they haven't, they've jostled against their own teammates, and that for in training and the intra-club a bit, but it's the first hit out against an actual opposition that you haven't spoken to or done anything with. So it's just they're doing things differently. We're doing things differently. So there's early season. There is always a lot of, I guess, fumbling, bad kicks, not players just not finding the right position. That happens, and I've seen people read into practice games a lot. You sort of just go, it's not. It's got nothing to do with what's going to happen later in the year. We look at you talk about the Carlton playing now against Melbourne, and they've held on by 5 points, but they were 8 goals up at one point. So against the reigning premiers, and you sort of go, well, yeah,
without most of their forward line,
it's a practice match. It's who knows? Melbourne was Max Gorn playing, I don't know, wing in the first half or something, or it's coaches do strange things in these games. Just test the waters and see what they can find.
Carlton are February, March specialists as well.
And obviously under Voss, they're pretty keen to launch. Yeah. And look, I mean, taking nothing away from them, they've got Shearer in the side. They're in the mix to make the 8, no doubt about that. But yeah, look, I mean, we dominated the second quarter. We were level with 4 minutes to go. I didn't like the clearance work. Obviously, we got belted in there, Cripps especially, and our ball use going inside 50 was poor. But as you say, it was quite rusty. Carlton's ball use was pretty average last week too, and much better tonight. So hopefully we get.
It was just who was the best of the worst sides that day. Basically, it was. I mean, they dominated the first quarter. We dominate the second quarter.
It's 10:30 on a Thursday as well. 10:30.
Yeah, it's a weird time to play a game of footy as well. That's. I guess they get it in before the heat and that sort of thing, but that's about it.
I am surprised they didn't pick Windhager, Owens, or Wanganeen.
I was just going to say, I mean, we spoke about kind of wondering how this team is going to line up round one, but do you take anything out of the fact that none of those guys played in that game and the selection, I guess, for that game? Obviously, it wasn't a young squad. We know that we get guys like Gresham and Patton back, Cooper Sharman, your first proper preseason and all that sort of stuff. But is it a worry that none of those guys played, a glorified scratch match?
It'll be a worry if they don't play this one either. I'm not expecting all of them to, but I'd want to have a look at. I mean, if neither of them play, then it means that neither are a realistic chance in round one. They don't have to play round one. But you'd like to have a look at them against Essendon, a solid outfit that played finals last year. You'd like to see how they go against a team like that on our home grounds. So yeah, I wouldn't mind throwing 1 or 2. I think they got bigger squads. I think so. You might be able to have 6, 7 on the bench, 8 on the bench, maybe.
Yep, 6 on the bench. Yep,
6 on the bench. So yeah, I mean, if your last 2 interchange spots, it's certainly worth throwing a couple of them their way.
And you also find that. If you go back into, I don't think the team listed anywhere in the annals of the internet anyway, but quite often you'll find that teams will play in the first scratch match, will play a decent team, and then the second game they'll bring a lot of the younger players in. It seems to be a bit of a trend with a lot of teams. So the first hit out is quite often a reasonable side, and then they seem to bring in the younger players that they've drafted and that in the off season. I guess it might be a point of, okay, well, where do we want to try them after we've had a bit of a look at what the senior team might be? Where do we think we might be able to squeeze him into that? So they want to have a proper look at the team first, I assume, to then work on that and then work, okay, we'll slide them into this position.
On these kids, and one that we haven't mentioned yet tonight, but obviously one that who's kind of been in the minds of supporters for a while is Jack Bartel. I think it's clear that Ryan Burns has now passed him in the pecking order. And that he will probably play most weeks now, Ryan Burns. This is going to be a really important season for Jack Bartel. And you would hope by the end of the year that he's banging that door down, against guys like Seb Ross, for those final spots in the midfield. How do you see Jack Bartel's progression over the last couple of years? Because I think most people would be pretty disappointed with the fact that he hasn't played more.
Yeah, I'd like to see a bit more opportunity. I mean, even over the preseason, I think he and Burns have been okay, but haven't been outstanding, but they've been okay. You'd like to see them. It's part of what could help us grow significantly as a team. If one or both of them, does a Jack Sinclair or something and kicks on. I'd like to see Vitale, more heavily used in that rotation, whether he needs a bigger tank. He kicked a lovely goal in the intra-club match where he sort of sharked it and kicked it on his opposite foot in traffic. So he can play. He obviously had 22 and kicked 2 or 3 against Freo in the last game last year. He's another one I'd like to see, well and truly get a little bit more time and on the ball, not sort of sub or anything like that. But if you're going to play him.
Yeah. I guess the other question was the rotation of that kind of mosquito fleet. You've got a number of those guys in Higgins, Butler, Long to an extent in terms of that forward. Mason Wood to some extent as well. Cooper
He's
Sharma
been all right for us. Yeah.
I guess how that looks, and with Gresham coming back as well, because he's I kind of feel Jade Gresham's the X factor.
Yeah, midfield.
I think
forward.
Gresham.
Yeah.
I think Gresham's going to spend probably more time in the midfield this year than what he will forward. It just seemed to slot into that position when he was there and played it really well. I think clearance-wise, he had almost twice as many as the next best player for us in that early weeks of the season. So it's not going to be a factor, I don't think, too much with him. He might go up forward to rest a bit maybe, but I think he's going to be playing probably midfield mostly. The small amount of the large amount of small players that we've got, probably then that meant the end of Loney for us. That meant we're not going to take Naish. We've got enough of those sort of players to fill the positions that we do need. So, I'd say it's going to be a case of if Gresham doesn't go off the field to rest, he'll go into the forward line to rest, and one of the other small forwards will go onto the bench. It's unless there's someone that we look at and they go, hey, okay, let's try them in the midfield for a bit as well, see how they go. Whether I don't know, Higgins wanted to play a bit more midfield time at some point, I think he said. So
and that's fair enough. I can live with that.
That could be a bit of a. I mean, if it's a Gresham 80-20 in the midfield and Higgins that 20, that could be something that works.
I mean, it just makes it makes the midfield that much more dynamic. I mean, I don't think you can overstate how important Jade Gresham is to that midfield unit. I mean, as good as Jack Steele is, and as workmanlike as Brad Crouch is, and some of those other guys through there isn't a lot of pace or dynamicism, if that's a word, in that midfield unit. Obviously, you want to see guys like Sinclair and Brad Hill with ball in hand, but in terms of kind of that combination of inside outside two-way running, there aren't many of those guys on our list, and Jade Gresham gives us something in terms of speed and athleticism through the middle that no one else can.
I'm going to introduce a few segments this year. I think one proposal was sort of thinking out loud. People can suggest names for them if they like, or even segments if they like via our channels. But I want to look at things like, naming awards after players. Like obviously the best and fairest being the Jack Steele Award. We spoke about the Shannon Noel for players that have to lift, but you can do, a Quiet Achiever Award being a Jason Blake, or a Most Improved Player of the Year being something like Stephen Milne, who obviously went from being a rookie to a superstar before the season was over when he came through in 01. But that Milne one, the Milne one's probably Cal Wilkie. The one that I probably wanted to start with is maybe a Milne Award as a final thought for this first episode, and I guess another way of phrasing that is that I'll put you both on the spot and then I'll give mine. If you had to pick one player if we're going to really get better, I'm putting it on. We know things that'll happen, like obviously if our ruckmen are fit, etc. But if we're really going to get better, who's an X factor in that? And for me, the one player that we've only mentioned a little bit through the coverage, I think we're capable of making the 8. But if I was to say there's one guy that might be able to, and there's obvious answers like Max King and the like, but for me, Hunter Clark is probably the one that if he can click and be what he looks like he can be and push into the middle, then that might be the difference between 9th and 5th or 7th and 4th or whatever it may be. But there's a few that can go into that category, H, but I'm going to go with Hunter Clark.
I'd probably go with someone who came back last year, Jimmy Webster. If you remember what he was doing before he got injured, if he can get back to where he was, the drive and the ball use out of the back line we had with him was magnificent. If all of a sudden we get this back, he's hitting up targets 75, 80 meters out from goal from a clearance. It puts you into such an attacking position straight away, as opposed to a player launching it out of the back line and bouncing out of bounds or going straight down the throat of a opposition defender. So his kicking is very good. And that is actually something we really did miss when he wasn't there as well. So we kind of feel like we're plugging these holes of things we had and lost. But if we can just get them all back in together, things will start ticking. So I reckon if he can find the form, then there's a huge step straight away, I think.
It's a real tough one because there's any number of guys that could fit the mold of that question. Like I said, if Hunter Clark takes that next step that we know he's capable of, then he can be anything. What Jimmy Webster was able to do when he came back in the team last year was very impressive. And I don't think I had him in our best 22 early in the year or preseason, but certainly became that, as did someone like a Dan McKenzie, almost one of the first picked for the work ethic and that sort of stuff. Similar to Hunter Clark is Jack Billings, who's got all the talent in the world and just hasn't been able to take that next step consistently, and could make a real difference to the way that we are perceived in the competition in terms of skill level and talent and all that type of thing. One that I think can make a real difference, and we've already touched on it, but I think if Josh Battle plays a full season at centre half back, if Dougal Howard stays fit, Cal Wilkie keeps doing what he's doing, and with guys like McKenzie, Webster, and those guys around him, if that back six and Patton, if they stay fit and healthy, and Battle becomes that centre half back that I think we all agree that we think that he should be and should have been for a while, then I think that's almost a finals worthy lift on its own. And everything else around that can become better because you're more stable through the back line. You've got better delivery coming out of defensive 50. You've got more intercept marks, which we're already not too bad at with Wilkie and Dougal Howard and those guys. But you add another element of Josh Battle and his big body and his good skills and the way he reads the play and can marshal, what happens further up the ground from that position. A little bit like Sam Fisher did. You mentioned Chips earlier, Parko, but Josh Battle can be a modern day Sam Fisher, a modern day Goose Maguire, who was so important to what we were trying to do in those times. And I think if Josh Battle can hold down that centre half back spot and that back six unit stays fit and healthy together, I think that's that could be a dominant back six.
Yep, I think so. I think that's a good way to finish as we look to the year. So if you monitor us on our socials, set your nominations through for that. We'll ask the question as well via those channels, and happy to take your feedback on any guest requests, any segment ideas, any awards that you want put forward. It's a new season, so put forward any ideas that you may have for going forward that you would like to see. We've got a lot of irons in the fire in terms of players and past players, current players, celebrities, etc., that we are chasing. A few of your suggestions on Twitter have already been pursued, so we've started the ball rolling on some of them, and hopefully we can land a couple of them over the coming weeks. There's a lot of famous Saints fans out there, and we'd love to chat to them. But enjoy the Bombers hit out. Obviously, we'll reconvene before the Collingwood game in round one and have a look at that. Good luck to the girls as well with some tough fixtures to come. But this has been episode 1 for 2022 for Unplugged. It's good to be back.